You're listening to the Back Home Network, presented by Home Field Apparel.
All right, folks, welcome back to Crimson Cast. Scott here with you. I'm joined, as always, by Galen, and we have a very special guest. If you're watching on video, you know. If you're listening, you won't know for a couple more minutes. But very excited about this one. This one's going to be awesome. Galen, how you doing, my man?
Doing great. Still recovering from that Pacers game in person last night. That was wild. It was a great day in Indiana sports history as we get an all-time game out of Tyrese Halliburton, and we get the reestablishment of an iconic figure within the IU or the Indiana sports landscape. So it's a good day all the way around.
It was. I had the moment at the game where I'm looking down, I'm like, that looks like Jelly Roll. And it's like, no, that is Jelly Roll. It's like, it's one of those where, like, if that was a normal regular season game against the Kings, like, that's not, it's just a guy with face tattoos. But you get to the Eastern Conference Finals, and it's like, oh no, that's actually who I think it is. Yeah, he was popular. 50 Cent was there. It was big times.
They packed him in.
Yeah, but before we get going, let's reach out to our sponsors, Home Field Apparel, who has been a proud sponsor of Crimson Cast and the Back Home Network for years. You can catch out all their great stuff. Even though the race is over, they still have tons of great racing gear you can pull up. And, it all started for us. Our Home Field Apparel journey started when Galen and I went to a Pacers game, and Galen was wearing this hoodie, this Bison hoodie, which will come in a little bit in our discussion today. And he's like, this is the most comfortable hoodie I've ever owned. And I was like, okay. And it also looks good, but comfort is great. So I bought one. It's awesome. And that's where it all started. Unfortunately, we didn't have the promo code HOME23 at the time, but you do. For your first purchase, you can get 15% off your first purchase using the promo code HOME23. They have tons of great stuff, and probably like your best stop for the Bison hoodie, I would say.
Absolutely.
Also, don't forget, we are on YouTube. What were we at, like 8,000 subscribers now? 8,500?
Close to Project 8,000 by the end of June. So let's make it happen.
Let's keep going, people. If you tell a friend and have them tell a friend and have them tell their parents and get them to subscribe to YouTube. We're also on Substack, substack.crimsoncast.com, where you get VIP videos, but also just get a nice little email reminder every time something Crimson Cast is posting. I think that's it. So I did my job.
Good job.
Thank you very much. Well, we are excited to have on again Jeremy Gray, the Indiana Senior Associate Athletic Director. That's a mouthful. It's a long business card, but it's nice. We had Jeremy on earlier in the year in October, where he and I talked about the history of the rally towels that were going on at Memorial Stadium, which is fun. And so I got to ask the question now. We have some great stuff coming out, but I'll start with this. Jeremy, are we going to get a Bison rally towel for the upcoming season this year?
We have not designed the towels for next year, but I find it an impossibility that one of the 7 will not be a Bison-themed towel. We are leaning into it, and I can just tell you that would be fast-track approved by Coach Signetti. He is Team Bison all the way.
So we wanted to have you, this is something Galen has been talking about for years, bring back the Bison. But if you don't know, what kind of spurred this podcast is there was just an absolutely awesome video just released by IU Athletics, kind of letting us know that the Bison is coming back with some great aerial shots of IU student government. But I thought we'd start here. Jeremy, if you could give us a little bit of the history of the Bison and Indiana University athletics. It's not just, I would love to say it's just Galen started this and just started saying, bring back the Bison. It's not. There is a longer history of Bison and IU connections.
Yeah, there are several tracks to this. So one, it goes all the way back to the founding of the university, where it's part of the state seal. There are things like our ROTC regiment. That's the Bison Battalion. They're the Bison Battalion Cadets. You will find imagery of the Bison in obscure places located around campus. And then there's been athletics involvement in it. Most famously, from 1965 to 69, the Bison was a mascot here at IU. It failed for a couple of reasons. One, the suit was especially cumbersome. The head was gigantic. It was difficult to see out of, and it was just poorly executed. And a cheerleader had to actually walk that Bison onto the field with a leash so it wouldn't trip and fall over itself. And if you take the Rose Bowl out of it, which is a massive moment, of course, in the history of IU athletics, Actually, the mid to late 60s were a pretty rough time for Indiana athletically. There were some things that were going on coming off of probation. Basketball at that point in time had waned a little bit. Yes, there was the Rose Bowl year and the great Doc Councilman teams, but there was a lot of faltering otherwise. And so with all of that, it just kind of disappeared in 1969, but it remained as a staple of the branding of, Nick's English Hut. It remained on various T-shirts that had been produced over the years. And it was something that just remained a low hum for a long, long time. And then about 10, 15 years ago, Fred Glass, go ahead.
Real quick. So you said, I just want to go back 1 second. So in the 60s, the mascot, the person wearing the costume had to be like a leash. It wasn't a live bison. It was like an actual person had to be walked around with a leash.
Yes. And it had a giant head. It could not see out of it. And so it literally had to have a cheerleader. Like all the photos you see of it, there's a cheerleader with a rope. And the cheerleader standing no further than 3 inches away from it at all times because it might trip and fall at any time. So it's just poorly executed.
That's wild.
And it died. And then they tried Mr. Hoosier Pride, which failed kind of every test of mascot hood possible. It had terrible eyes, so it terrified children. It did not accentuate the brand of the school. It actually harmed it in some ways. It was totally associated with losing. So it went away as well.
And then when Galen and I were going to school, they had like the inflatable just like an inflatable guy who was an IU fan.
That was a late 90s thing that will always be difficult to explain to people in future generations. It'll be up there with Zuba's pants and the appeal of MC Hammer. But
I feel like the further we get away from the 90s, the harder they are to explain to anybody. Like they make no sense.
Yeah,
no question. Like the baggy corduroy pants, like all of it was just totally impractical. But it went away there. And then Fred Glass, and I think he deserves more credit than what he is going to get through this process. Fred Glass liked the idea of having a mascot, and there were some videos that preceded IU football games about 10, 15 years ago that included some bison imagery. They were computer-generated animation. And they've actually kind of endured in the memory of the fan base in, I think, some key ways. And then, and you have one of the central characters in the drama co-hosting with you here today, but there was the Bring Back the Bison campaign on campus. And we'll get to their involvement actually in one of the 5 videos in a bit. And while we all love Galen, I think Dr. Gutierrez is really kind of the George Washington of that enterprise and fought the good fight in a lot of ways, really summoning up energy behind the idea, creating things that actually got cease and desist letters, over time. But that kind of spurred it on for a bit. And then various student groups over the last 3 or 4 years have really picked up momentum behind the idea. And then all of the stars really aligned in the last 12 months or so to make it possible.
Yeah.
So that was a long answer.
No, that's great.
I'll chip a couple of other things in there. First of all, that hoodie you're wearing that you mentioned in the intro, I was texting with Connor Hitchcock from Home Field, and he reminded me because I asked him, I was like, when did that come out? And he said it was 2017, and it was actually before Home Field became Home Field. It was still a company called Hoosier Proud, which if you listen to Assembly Call, you know the Hoosier Proud banner moment. That's where that comes from. But I'll always credit that hoodie kind of on the heels of the Pat Kraft led Bison video that popped up in whatever that was, 2010, I think, that I think put the Bison back in the minds of a lot of people. And I know for me, we'd had talks on and off about, the Bison, that used to be the mascot, but I don't feel it got serious until that hoodie popped up again. And
I would agree.
That I think was really kind of a seminal moment. And it's interesting, like what's happened since then, because that was only 8 years ago, but an idea that was kind of DOA across multiple presidents and, always seemed to get a lot of resistance from certain segments of the university branding team and certain pockets of alumni. Suddenly there started to be a lot more momentum that picked up across the board on it.
Do you think it's just merch? Like, what do you think changed because like you said, for years there was kind of a, we don't need a mascot, or even like almost pride in that we don't have a mascot. We don't need that. We're we are who we are. And as a fan too, just a fan as a podcaster, I definitely felt the change over the last couple of years. What do you think kind of helped make that movement, go forward?
I think a couple of things, and I think we have to look at this with a certain degree of humility too. That the pinstripes work for the New York Yankees because they're the New York Yankees, and they can hold on to kind of this never-changing thing. I would say there's a desire a little bit for a fresh start, because a lot of things that have been attempted over the last 25 years as it pertains to the basketball program have kind of gone through fits and starts. So I think the appetite for trying something new as a department is greater than it's been ever in my time here. I think you couple that with a year of great latitude and experimentation in football, where almost all of the gambles paid off. And then it was backed up by a highly successful season. I think those things led people to be willing to give this a chance. I do think the hoodie that you're wearing is part of the story. People, buy their relatives Nick's English Hut glass mugs for Christmas. They like that image. And then I think technology has helped, where people were able to make their own AI-generated graphics, and they were ridiculous. A chain-smoking bison disemboweling a Spartan or whatever, but like people were able to make that, and people really kind of rallied behind that to a certain degree. And then I think students look for moments, and this was really student-led in a lot of ways. And I do think having Lee Corso back here for College Game Day and him picking IU to win, and this is no disrespect to the baseball cap that he wore, it felt like it was this great coronation of the program, the school, the reuniting of this iconic figure in college football with the school that kind of helped make them. And we put on a baseball hat instead of something that really kind of established the brand. I think all of those elements played into people really wanting to do this.
So the other piece that, as a fan, that I'll throw in there that I thought was a moment as well, as I do think that year 2015, 2016, whenever the football team released like 9 different jerseys for one year, where it's just like, whoa, this is like, as a fan, like, this is the athletic department just doing something totally different, including the chrome striped helmet, which, at least from my perspective, seemed to get a very positive fan reaction. It felt like that was also a moment where it's like, hey, we can monkey with uniforms a little bit and really have something cool here.
I agree. I think the other part about it is, I'm almost 50 years old. More of my beard is gray than it is brown at this point. So I'm technically one of the old guys now. And I do think these things change. So people, there's always kind of a fear of certain segments of the fan base. Well, I'm 50 years old, and I grew up with hip hop music and liking mascots. And so I think maybe the demographics of the fan base have changed some.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because you mentioned that desire for a new start across the board. It's something that with football, you're almost asking for a start, period, because it never really felt like football ever got its own thing. I mean, at its most successful points, so you mentioned like the late 60s, that season came out of nowhere and then was gone just as quickly. So there was never really a chance to build on that momentum. And even in the Mallory era, it was overshadowed throughout that entire time period by Bob Knight and IU men's basketball, which had their own very staid traditions that essentially enveloped the entire athletic department. I mean, the one time football tried something different, it resulted in the Oval, which is still probably, Jeremy, would you say the single most divisive thing that's ever been associated with IU athletics?
It's up there. I mean, like, I can tell you it'll be the next person who has my job who brings it back. I'm scared of it.
Yeah. What would be easier for you to do? Bring back a new mascot or just bring back the oval as a full-time uniform?
But I mean, now especially, and it's weird how this all synced up. And Jeremy, this is maybe where I'd love to hear you talk about the timing and the sequencing of all of this, because as recently as a couple of years ago, I'm having a chat with Paul Gutjahr, who's giving me Bison merch to pass out guerrilla warfare style to people on campus, which I dutifully did. I've still got a box like half filled with that merch in my office. But all the way up to the top of the university, the idea is, well, we're never going to have a mascot. Like, it's not what we do. And then it almost felt like little things happened along the way. I'll give Trent McGee some credit, who's no longer with IU, but was at the time, at IUSF at the Student Foundation. They bring a kind of a junior version Bison mascot to the Little 500 races in 2024, I think it was. And I think Ryder is the name of that mascot. It ends up riding around with President Whitten in a car. And there's like pictures and everything, but it was like the ice melted and then the dam broke. So like, what has this process been like over the last 18 months as the momentum's picked up on this?
Yeah. And I think before I go into that, I do think, for very understandable reasons, and I hope that this doesn't sound like judgment of, frankly, decisions that I had a part in before and what people I worked with before made, for very understandable reasons, after about 1998 until about 2 years ago, this was a risk-averse athletic department. There were very controversial things that had happened. The firing of the most iconic coach of all time, the probation, hyping up football teams that then immediately underwhelmed, and scared of saying win today. So it was a risk-averse athletic department in a lot of ways, and for understandable reasons. And frankly, Kurt Signetti threw that all out the window. And I will give my boss a lot of credit. I got this kind of marketing fell into my area of responsibility really this time last year. And he said, do whatever you want. Like, you can figure out what you want to do with this football program. Whatever we've been doing hadn't worked. And so we changed a lot of things, and a lot of them ended up working out because we ended up winning as well. Like, those two things worked in concert together. So I think we are finally through a 20-year period where everybody was scared of how other people would react because of how angry they were about different situations. So getting rid of that, or getting through that, I think changed a lot of the appetite for this. But you mentioned the IUSF, Trent McGee, the Little 500 part of this, the guerrilla warfare of bring back the bison, passing out little foam bison out in the parking lot of football games and seeing koozies appear out of nowhere, crazy hats, all of that kind of stuff. I do think that made the release of this much, much better. I would have been happy when we started this process and when we determined we were going to do it, if we got a 60-40 reaction. That's what we expected. We looked at what happened when the Cubs introduced Clark and other new mascot reveals. It's like a lot of people are going to hate it at first. I think it's 95-5 because the ice melted. Some of it we did. Little video board graphics, the schedule cards with horns on it, leaning into it a little bit. Some of it are home field sweatshirts. Some of it are the AI generated graphics by fans. Some of it is seeing IUSF adopt it and giving the plush toys to the winning riders of the Little 500. I think all of that made the reveal of it much more palatable to the fan base. But I think winning in football, a series of meetings with everyone from Student Athletic Board to the Board of Aons to the student body president, made people feel that the students really, really wanted this. Seeing what we could have done with football had we had a mascot, but were unable to do so, kind of whet the appetite of maybe some people who were initially reluctant to the idea. And then December 16th, 2024, when the student government officially passed that resolution to bring back the Bison, I think everybody at that point in time was on board of, we got to do this. And then we just waited for the suit to be created. And we realized once we got the suit, more than 3 people can't keep a secret. So we got to reveal this thing. And so that's how the videos came to pass.
I will say I did notice the little breadcrumbs, and I think it was important, but I think it was almost, I felt like the athletic department winking at us, not us, but the fans, because obviously I knew Galen was talking about it. I knew kind of some of the swag going around, but then like this year at football games, in between plays, there was kind of a red backdrop with little logos all over the place, like IU, the state of Indiana, and like there was this logo as part, or a Bison type logo in there, and it's like, oh, they're aware, like they know people are talking about, like threw it in there. So I like that.
We actually did that to see if people would complain.
Oh, okay.
It was like a trial balloon. Like we met with some students. There's momentum behind this idea. We're going to put this up there, and if people complain, and actually we got the opposite, where it's, why didn't you make the whole video of that? Which was a great leading indicator for us.
I respect you have to like take all complaints into there, but it's like if somebody's like goes to a game, it's like it's a great experience, but during one of the video replays, there is an image with 5 images up there. One of those I disagree with. Like that would be an insane someone to say.
You'd be amazed at what comes through email. Okay.
Very fair. But so I don't want to get too wonky or in the weeds, but I am curious. Like, so IU student government passes a resolution, like bring back the Bison. I'm curious, what are the next steps? Like, who has votes in that process? Because it's not as simple as, hey, the student government said it, like, okay, we're putting in a mascot. Like, it's going to be, because they can just be like, we want Marshmallow as our mascot. Like, there has to be like, does Witten get involved? Like, I'm curious kind of from a just procedural point of view. Once it's like, this is something I think we're actually going to go down, as much as you can talk about like what are the next steps? Who has the next steps? Who has the votes? Who's in the room? And like, who has the vote to actually veto it if they wanted to?
Yeah. So it's a great question. And I want to make sure I keep this vague enough that I'm right enough about this, but let's just say in September, I convinced Scott that it was a good idea.
Not me.
Yes. Mark Skirvin has always been for this idea. We gave kind of the rationale of why we think it's important, and we'll talk about maybe that a little bit later. I think the president really got excited about it when she heard how excited the students were about it. She has positioned herself as a student-focused president. It's been something that she's declared in every communication since she became president. And once the student government decided that this is something that they really wanted, and you couple that with the justification that Scott brought to her of how it can increase revenue, it can increase fan loyalty, especially amongst young people, how we do need to try some new things to modernize the presentation of some of our programs. She then was all in. So that was kind of the process of it.
I'll also note, I mean, it's been palpable the excitement students have had about this, and it kind of feeds into something that you were talking about earlier, which is for this generation of students, many of whom grew up as IU fans, I think it's important for them to feel like they've got something that's their own, that feels like it's from their era. And I mean, whatever you want to say about IU athletics, and you mentioned like it's been kind of a rough 25 years in terms of like overall successes, a lot of it, that has left a void. And it's not too different from what occurred during that exact same period that you were talking about from like the mid 1950s until really when Bob Knight got on campus. And that period right there led to a bunch of established traditions and norms that carried through.
Candy stripes, the under 8 timeout, Martha's intro of basketball, the script Indiana, the block eye, like, yes.
We're all new at one point.
Well, we've just been playing the hits for a long time, and a new album would be nice.
Yeah, well, I think this is where this is not just an IU thing. This happens with a lot of athletic departments, a lot of institutions. and you mentioned like being kind of getting to that age where you're one of the old people. I'm in the same boat. And it's like at some point you realize that you're allowed to create your own culture and you're allowed to modernize the culture around what the tastes and the expectations are of people at the time. And so does this happen 10 years earlier, or, is there still shadows that you're living in at that point? I think is an open question.
Yeah, I do too. And you live history in real time, and it's hard to actually describe to somebody who just started working here how contentious things were 15 years ago. Yeah.
So I'm also curious. All right, we're going through the process. The students have voted for it. It's gone up the chain. I'm assuming that both coaches are in favor of this. Like you said, Cignetti's very a fan of this as well. So like Cignetti's in, President Witten is in, and DeVries is in. So now I'm curious, like what the next steps. You can't just be like, all right, we're putting a bison out there. Like, well, let's get the helmet with the chain and go back to the 60s. Like, do you have to consult with a mascot? I know there is, like, I've saw it in like real sports. Like, there's like mascot schools, there's mascot creation consultants. What are the next steps of like, all right, we're going to put a bison mascot. We haven't seen it in full. We've seen kind of, aerial shots. We know kind of what it might look like. And that might even just be a teaser. Maybe there's something else coming out there. But I'm just curious, like, at that point, do you need to, we're going to hire a mascot consultant to take the next steps?
Yeah. So there's a couple things that we've got to do. So one, there is going to be a coach assigned to it, somebody to run the mascot program, working in consultation with the Spirit Squad, the cheerleaders. There is a mascot camp, and we will send the people who will be wearing the suit to mascot camp. We have to determine, what is this mascot going to do? Like, how is it going to be introduced? What does it perform? I think on a more granular level, something that's really, really important, especially to what I think, and maybe, everybody tells me it's a great idea because they feel that I participated in the idea, and maybe behind my back, they say other things. But judging from, and I've looked around even at the negative, I feel like it's about 95-5. Yeah. The 5% often the objection is, what does this have to do with Indiana? And I think on a granular level, rather than just saying state seal over and over again, or we used to have it, or the Bison Battalion, or look at, you've been to Nick's, right? I think we need to tie this to the state of Indiana in fundamental ways. And so I think you'll see that on social media, tying it to other traditions within the state to make it feel like it's ours, I think is an important thing to do as we roll this thing out.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that a lot as well, this idea of like, well, what does the bison have to do with Indiana? And there is a ton of historical stuff, but it's also, it feels like to me, and I think maybe this leads into some of the revenue and merchandising aspects that obviously fit into this. If you look at college football, it's far more important to have a mascot, something that you can point to other than just your logo in college football. I mean, the college football video game for years had a mascot only game that you could play within it. I mean, these are things that are part of the culture of college football. And since IU has really gone all in on taking college football seriously, there's a big need there. And you want something there that can represent the spirit of what you're doing. And I think as Zach Osterman pointed out in that excellent piece that he wrote, which he obviously relied on you for a lot of interviews for, what is a Hoosier? We've been asking that since the formation of the state. That's a hard thing to represent by itself. And the fact that the state of Indiana's got a historical animal that's, it's powerful, it's regal, it's not a lion or a tiger or, anything that you'll normally see. It's unique, and it also does have a tie. I think all that really fits into it quite a bit.
I do too. And there's a mountain of research in it. It's true for me anecdotally. In my own personal experience, there's a ton of research out there that says your fandom, if you choose that team prior to the age of 6, is much deeper and much more loyal than a favorite team you pick after the age of 6. And my insane devotion to the St. Louis Cardinals and the, Indiana basketball and all of that kind of stuff, I think, it kind of tells that tale. So connecting the program with children, I think, is really, really important in making this a kid-friendly mascot. And so the constitution of its eyes. Soft eyes make it approachable. All of the mascots you put out there on like the 10 creepiest mascot list, they have bad eyes. The vacant stare of Purdue Pete, for instance. So having soft eyes is important. But then you also have to understand your competition. We're in the Big Ten Conference. You've got Sparty out there. You got the Turtle out there, whatever its name is. I don't really care. You got the sad thing from Penn State, the world's weakest lion. I wanted it to look like a Marvel character. So it's got soft eyes to make it approachable to children. But as I said in the Zach article, tough enough to win a play fight against a turtle at halftime,
What I also love, I think everything you're saying is great. I do think, to me, it's like, I want to turn this around, and it's less about what's the connection with the Bison, where we just look at Purdue and be like, hey man, what's a Boilermaker have to do with the state of Indiana? Like, ours is the flag. Like, what, you guys really suck. Like, you just have a weird vacant stare Purdue guy who has there's no connection to Indiana.
And it's like a Tar Heel's a Civil War soldier that didn't back up, but their symbol is a ram. It's the Crimson Tide, and they've got an elephant. This is less unusual than I think it's being portrayed, but it's our job to explain it, and people can feel about it however they want to feel about it. But I think it's important for us to kind of establish that connection. And I would also go further, and I'm from the state of Indiana. I love Indiana. I've lived all but 3 years of my life in Indiana. The people have been able to represent Hoosier, that phrase, in the ways that they have chosen, and not necessarily in the way that people from Indiana would have chosen. There are old pictures of Big Ten mascots from the late 1970s, and the other 9, back when it was a 10-team league, represented those schools the way they wanted to be represented, and they have a shoeless person in a straw hat sitting down with holes in their jeans as a representation of a Hoosier. So we can maybe change the way we define ourselves a little bit. And that might be pie in the sky and a little too aspirational, but this is the representation of the Hoosiers when they're putting it in cartoon form.
I wanted to get in, as we kind of wrap up here a little bit, like the dramatic arc of the reveal. You obviously had a big hand in this, and the videos that came out really did a good job of teasing this back. I think people kind of figured out early on where it was headed, but it was still fun, and we see this in a lot of these social media comments for people to ride along with that over the 4 or 5 episodes. So, what was the creative process for you and for the Cuban Center video team and Andrew Brown and that whole group in figuring out how you were going to do this, what the best way to reveal it was, and then obviously ultimately executing that?
So really it started with Scott Dolson, who got really excited about the idea of this thing being in a coffin, rising from the dead, and the hand peeking out. And that's how he wanted it to start. From there, we had to look at what are our objectives. So objective 1, mascots are supposed to be fun, so we need to have fun with this in some way. Objective 2, we got to let everybody know that this is for all of our sports and not just football. So we needed to communicate that. We need to make it look playful and approachable over the arc itself. And so it ends in a much happier place. And then a little bit of mystery to keep people talking, I think was important. And so we kind of outlined it out. And I promise I'm not running to the front of the parade on this, but I'm big into movies. Galen knows this. I actually used to be a movie critic. So I'm into it. So I love movies. And so I started to think of tropes from some of my favorite movies that were widely seen by people. And so the box in the first one glows, right? And it's got a title card, and it's clear that we're going to tell this story out of order. So it's got the Pulp Fiction briefcase that glows, story told out of order with a bunch of title cards. And then I always love the scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark where he keeps telling everybody how dangerous it is. And they say, well, it's going to be taken care of by top men. So I sent Nate and Sean, who are the 2 maintenance people who are working in the video itself, and they made the crate to look like the Raiders of the Lost Ark crate. Plus that ends up getting open and, kills all the Nazis, whatever. And then the third part of that one was Silence of the Lambs. The way too casual night watchman doesn't listen to what he's told and lets Hannibal Lecter out, right? So I'm the idiot who opens the case and lets this thing out. And then the second one, it's Alien. So Sydney Parrish is Ripley. She's a tough woman who sees something, and none of the other people around her believe her. And then the Doc Yeagley, Montgomery McCracken is an ode to our 4 great coaches, but really it's the Richard Attenborough character in Jurassic Park who sees nothing but opportunity and profit in this scientific discovery. And then the third one, which is kind of my favorite one, we were going to have Sig do the Roy Scheider scene from Jaws, where he turns around, and he's got the bucket of chum or whatever. He's like, nah, I'm going to say something else. And we're like, okay. And he just did his own thing, and it was a perfect 8-second it was just totally on brand for him and what this is about. Like, this is an approachable animal. And then in the fourth one, we did E.T. E.T.'s in the house. The toys start flying around. The plants grow again. And so they can't figure out what's going on in their house. So basically, E.T. solves our shooting problems in Assembly Hall. That's kind of that. And then the fifth one, obviously the Star Wars scroll, but because it's Return of the Bison, we say it's episode 6. And then the flashback sequence from The Usual Suspects shows like why all of this is supposed to make sense, and that it was really the vote of the student government that brought this creature to life, that started all of the events that we had. And then I'm like, all right, this thing's coming back. What's the greatest return in the history of the world? It's like Michael Jordan returning to the NBA with the 2-word press release of I'm back. And so we're like, let's put it on Scott's desk that he says he's back. And then we find him on the top of his domain, peering out over what he's going to oversee over these next years. So we had a good time with it. And Trevor Bowens and Will Kirby was the guy in the suit for all the videos. He got stuffed in a crate. Now, it's not easy. That's definitely in other duties as assigned on his employment agreement. And then Andrew Brown did a great job with the videos as well. So we had a lot of fun.
It came through. I mean, they were awesome. The last one was great. Although all I can think of is like alt, the internet's going to have fun with this, like alt cuts of like other Pulp Fiction, scenes you could do from that. It's like, the fight with the thing and stabbing him in the chest with the shot. And yeah, there's some wild stuff. For
sure. And actually Galen and Dr. Gutierrez were Marvel movies. So Stan Lee, always is ordering a slice of pizza in Spider-Man 2 or whatever. They were the fake faculty advisors, so we had to put the people who started bringing back the Bison as kind of the Stan Lee little Easter egg in there. So it was fun to have them be a part of it.
That's awesome. No, the videos were awesome. As we wrap it up, I have a couple of kind of random questions I just want to throw out there that people have asked me. So I'll just put these in no particular order. One, any plan on a real bison on the field, like kind of like Colorado?
Okay, that's a great question. And it's one that we actually wrestled with over the course of the process. There are a lot of challenges to it. And if you look at the live mascots, other than dogs, the live mascots, the hard to train,
right,
fundamentally very dangerous animal mascots, those have a really long legacy. To find 6 people every year to run this thing on the field, to feed it, to pay for it, all that kind of stuff, it just feels too cumbersome. I'm not saying that there isn't a day that could potentially occur, but there are no plans for it now. We have had actually a lot of people who run bison farms have in 24 hours invited Hoosier to come out and visit, and they talk about calves that are being bottle fed right now and would be perfect companions to the mascot. So you never know. We'll keep the door open on that.
NIL stuff, goes wild. Like you could have, players promoting bison farms around the state. Yeah.
And I would say this is one surprising element, how excited the athletes are about this and have been from the start. They actually put some bison imagery in the weight room like 4 or 5 months ago. As the videos started, I would get text messages from track coaches and field hockey coaches like, when is it going to happen? When's it? Because their athletes were asking them. Yeah. So the athletes have really responded to this. I mean, Sydney Parrish was over the moon to be a part of it. So, all right, next question.
The other one that I have is mind. My mind immediately went to this. Are we going to see integration of a Bison logo in football, basketball jerseys, alternate jerseys? Is that something that's being thought of or on the roadmap? Because I can imagine, a helmet with Bison, they used to have like, the IU on one side and the state logo on the other. So that was cool. A Bison logo. I'm thinking of, the basketball shorts, like having a Bison on there. I'm curious if that's been thought of using it within uniforms and or complete alt uniforms based on the logo?
Well, we're still finishing up the process on the artwork for whatever that logo will be. So we don't have anything in the design stages. I would say it's an absolute possibility and a high likelihood that it would occur. Again, to the athletes excited about it, we've had 3 programs already reach out about putting the Bison on their warm-up shirts. So they're into it. I would assume that it will make its way onto apparel that the players and the athletes will wear in the field of play.
That's awesome. And last one for us, our podcast, Galen came up with some new imagery. It's our logo. Are we good to still use our Bison that we have on Crimson Cast, or are we going to seal approval, or are we going to have to change?
Go for it. I do think you need a new sign off, Galen. I'm actually we need to workshop this.
I've gotten probably 80 people have reached out in the last 24 hours saying some combination of, hey, congrats. And it's always like, how are you going to sign off on the podcast now? And I have zero idea at this point.
Don't open source it. I can tell you from experience in a very short period of time, I've gotten 7,278 recommendations on what song we should play during the third quarter, and no 2 are the same from any 2 people. And you tangentially participated in the naming of the Bison process, and 9 people came up with 9 different names that they preferred. So, write your own sign off. Don't open source it. Make them live with it.
That gives me one more question. Can you? Name is Hoosier, right? It's Hoosier the Bison. Can you throw out any other names that were considered or that didn't make the cut? And you don't need no attribution needed.
So I will say this. One, we wanted it to be unique. So I think that was important. 2, we opted not to go the route of someone who was once a living figure. I do find it, and it's endearing because, who doesn't, as an IU person, have a great deal of respect for the Bob Knight years? I'm like, I can't think of anything Bob Knight would want less than to have a mascot named after him. Fair. So we opted not to do living figures, also because we've seen around our own campus that history has a way of changing things, and you just don't want to be 20 years from now and you name it after a person and something is looked at a different lens and you got to change the name. So we steered away from living figures, and then we tried to think of truly IU-y things. And every alley we went down, and Galen had a suggestion that he can offer on his own. Every alley we went down, there were 2 or 3 people who brought up an objection. So this felt like the safest choice, which I know is not what people want to hear. I just don't think we had an obvious one at IU. And redefining Hoosiers seemed appealing. Yeah. And I really wanted to nail the reveal and the suit. I'll let other people determine whether or not we did the suit well and nailed the reveal well. The early returns seem pretty good. And I think they'll warm to the name. And I actually think little kids yelling Hoosier, to get a picture, I think will work.
I agree with that. I was not sure about it at first, and the more I thought about it, I was like, it actually makes sense. It ties it a lot more closely directly to the university, and it needed to be redefined anyway. So I think that it ends up hitting all the marks. No, I don't think anybody's going to complain about it. That's the thing.
No, I agree. I like it. Hearing your thought process makes sense. As you were thinking, I was like trying to think you go like Herman Wells, but like Wells is not a fun, like, hey, Wells, it's our mascot like that. Then you have to have another whole backstory. I think that all makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad you guys are excited about it. I'm ready for the merch to come out, and I'm ready to see this thing come to events this upcoming fall. No, and by the way, we have a lot of interchangeable uniforms and outfits for it. So it's going to hit the mark when it goes to a tennis match, a field hockey game, a football game, obviously the basketball games. I think it's exciting. And I also think, back to the humility, we've got to reconnect our basketball program to our student body. It has been broken, and we've got to reestablish that. And I don't think that this is a cure-all for that, but I think it's a step in the right direction that we're going to try to do new things with student engagement in basketball.
Yeah, no, I think you're doing great stuff. It's awesome. As again, part of the new old guy club, I am all for it. I like it. So Jeremy, I appreciate it. And I look forward to more rally towels. And what's great is, and I mean this in a very positive way, like we've now had you on twice in 6 months because of really unique, interesting, fun things that the university and the athletic department are doing that are getting fan interest, engagement, enough so that it's like, I want to talk to Jeremy for an hour about how did this happen? How are we doing this? So, I mean, that is awesome. And so appreciate everything you guys are doing and looking forward to a great season with Signetti, with DeVries, and with Hoosier, our new mascot.
Yeah, really, really excited about it. And last time I was on this show, I complimented your sweatshirt, and my mom got it for me for the holidays because I said something nice about your sweatshirt. So I made sure that I didn't mention anything you're wearing or in the background, so that I get the gift cards that I want next year.
Well, I mean, yeah, we have the Millennium Falcon. So, Mama Gray, if you want to, get Jeremy that, we can look at that for Father's Day coming up. We have some really cool gear right there. Anyway, no. Well, Jeremy, thank you so much for joining. Galen, as always, it's awesome having you on. Want to thank everybody for listening. And for Galen, for Jeremy, this is Scott saying we brought back the Bison. So long, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Dude, thanks, man. Awesome. Appreciate it.